Have you ever felt it? That inexplicable pull towards someone, as if invisible threads were drawing you together across time and circumstance? Not the shallow attraction that fades with familiarity, but something deeper, something that whispers in a language your conscious mind struggles to translate. Carl Jung spent a lifetime mapping the hidden architecture of such moments, and what he discovered challenges everything we think we know about coincidence, destiny, and the intelligence that might be orchestrating encounters we dismiss as random chance. Before we descend into this mystery together, let me tell you what we're actually exploring today. We're not here to peddle cosmic wish fulfillment or validate every passing infatuation with spiritual significance. Instead, we're investigating a precise psychological phenomenon Jung called synchronicity, a causal connecting principle that seems to align inner psychological states with outer events in ways that defy statistical probability. When applied to human connection, this principle suggests that certain relationships don't just happen to us. They happen through us, as if some deeper intelligence were using the raw material of our psyche to engineer specific encounters. If you're curious about the invisible architecture behind meaningful connection, if you've ever wondered whether the universe might actually be trying to tell you something through the patterns in your relational life, then welcome to Deep Psyche Lab. I'm glad you're here. This is where we take the profound seriously without losing our grounding in psychological reality. If this resonates, subscribe now and turn on notifications, because what we explore in this space doesn't conform to algorithmic trends. It follows the deeper currents. Jung discovered something remarkable during his years of clinical work and personal crisis. He noticed that his patients would often experience outer events that mirrored with uncanny precision the psychological content they were working through internally. A woman dreams of a golden scarab beetle, an ancient Egyptian symbol of transformation, at the exact moment she's resisting a breakthrough in therapy. As she describes this dream, Jung hears a tapping at his window. He opens it, and a scarab beetle, extraordinarily rare in Switzerland, flies into the room. This wasn't mere coincidence in Jung's assessment. It was synchronicity, a meaningful arrangement of inner and outer events connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning itself. Now, apply this principle to human relationships. When Jung spoke of synchronicity and connection, he wasn't suggesting that the universe plays matchmaker in some sentimental sense. He was pointing to something far more psychologically sophisticated. He believed that when an individual reaches a certain state of psychological readiness, when specific unconscious contents are ready to become conscious, the psyche doesn't just generate internal dreams and fantasies, it begins to constellate external events that mirror and catalyze that internal process. Another person can become the carrier of projected unconscious content. Yes, but in cases of genuine synchronistic connection, they become something more. They become a living symbol, a flesh and blood manifestation of psychological potential trying to emerge into consciousness. This is where most spiritual teachings get it backwards. They suggest you'll meet the right person when you're healed, when you're complete, when you've done all your inner work. Jung understood something more paradoxical. Often you meet the person precisely because you're not complete. The relationship itself is the vessel through which unconscious material becomes conscious. The universe, if we can call it that, doesn't send you someone because you've graduated from your psychological curriculum. It sends you someone because they carry the exact configuration of qualities, wounds, and gifts that your psyche needs to encounter in order to continue its individuation process. Let me be specific about what this looks like in lived experience. The first sign Jung identified is what he called the numinous quality of the encounter. Numinous is a term borrowed from religious phenomenology, describing an experience that feels simultaneously fascinating and terrifying, overwhelming and magnetic. When you meet someone through synchronistic arrangement, there's an immediate sense of recognition that transcends normal attraction. It's not that you've met them before in some literal past life sense, though the psyche might construct that narrative. It's that they carry an archetypal quality that your unconscious has been seeking. They feel mythologically significant before you even know their last name. This numinosity isn't always comfortable. In fact, it's often deeply unsettling. You might feel exposed, seen in ways you haven't given permission for, recognized in aspects of yourself you've kept hidden. This isn't the comfortable resonance of meeting someone similar to you. This is the electric shock of meeting someone who activates dormant parts of your psychological system. Your dreams might intensify. You might notice unusual patterns in your waking life, small coincidences that seem to reference this person or the themes they represent. You're not imagining this. You're experiencing the psyche's way of flagging something significant, of marking an encounter that has developmental importance. The second sign involves a quality Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to hold the tension between opposites until a third thing emerges. When the universe, or more accurately, when the self, that central organizing principle of the psyche that Jung distinguished from the ego, wants you to be with someone, the relationship will consistently activate opposing forces within you. You'll feel pulled toward them and simultaneously terrified. You'll experience them as familiar and utterly foreign. This isn't dysfunction. This is the psyche's way of creating the necessary tension for transformation. The relationship becomes a container, an alchemical vessel in which elements of your personality that have been split off can begin to integrate. Most relationships operate at the level of ego compatibility. You find someone who reinforces your existing self-concept, who doesn't challenge your defense mechanisms too aggressively, who allows you to remain comfortably within your established psychological boundaries. These relationships have their place. They provide stability, companionship, the pleasures of shared life. But synchronistic relationships operate at the level of self. They don't confirm who you think you are. They reveal who you're becoming. And that process is rarely comfortable. It requires a death of the smaller self to make room for a larger one. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Jung noticed that synchronistic events tend to cluster around individuals who are in what he called a state of constellation, when an archetype has been activated in the unconscious. If you've been unconsciously seeking the sacred marriage, that alchemical union of masculine and feminine principles within yourself, your psyche will begin arranging reality to present you with opportunities to work on that theme. A person might enter your life who embodies the exact qualities your inner masculine or feminine needs to encounter. The universe isn't sending you a spouse. It's sending you a teacher disguised as a lover, a mirror disguised as an other, an opportunity disguised as a person. The third sign is what Jung called the pattern of meaningful obstacles. This might sound counterintuitive, but pay attention. When a relationship has synchronistic significance, it won't necessarily be easy. In fact, the obstacles themselves often carry meaning. The timing might be terrible. You might live in different cities, different life stages, different levels of availability. These aren't signs you should ignore the connection. They're part of the synchronistic pattern itself. The obstacles are teaching you something about patience, about the difference between ego desire and soul necessity, about your own patterns of pursuing or avoiding intimacy. Jung would ask his patients to pay attention to the quality of the obstacles, not just their presence. Are they external logistics that could theoretically be solved? Or are they pointing to internal psychological work that needs to happen first? Is the person married, indicating perhaps that you're still working through triangulation dynamics from your family of origin? Is the distance geographic, suggesting that parts of your psyche need more space before they're ready for merger? The universe doesn't create obstacles arbitrarily in synchronistic scenarios. The obstacles are part of the message, sometimes the most important part. I want to address something crucial here, something Jung was adamant about. Synchronicity is not causation. The universe is not mechanically manipulating events to bring you together with someone. That would be a primitive, magical understanding. Instead, Jung proposed that at certain moments, the unconscious and conscious, the inner and outer, the subjective and objective, operate from a unified field. Meaning is the connecting principle, not force. When your psyche is ready to work on certain developmental tasks, people who can facilitate that work appear, not because they're being sent to you from some cosmic dispatch center, but because you and they are both participating in a deeper field of meaning that transcends individual causation. This is why you can't manifest a specific person through visualization or affirmations in any reliable way. You can't manipulate synchronicity through ego will, but you can create conditions that make you more available to synchronistic events. Jung called this attitude the transcendent function, a kind of active receptivity. You don't demand that the universe send you someone with specific height, income, and credentials. Instead, you become curious about what psychological themes are trying to emerge in your life right now, what your dreams are emphasizing, what keeps appearing in your outer circumstances, and you follow those threads with conscious attention. The fourth sign is reciprocal activation. In a synchronistic connection, both people will feel it. This doesn't mean both people will act on it, or that both people will be available for relationship at the same time, but both will recognize something unusual in the encounter. Jung noticed that in cases of genuine synchronicity involving two people, both individuals would often report similar dreams, similar intuitions, similar feelings of familiarity or destined encounter. This mutuality is crucial. If you're the only one feeling the cosmic significance, you're likely dealing with projection, not synchronicity. The universe doesn't send one-sided messages. This brings us to a difficult truth Jung never shied away from. Sometimes the universe brings someone into your life not to be with them in the conventional sense, but to learn something through them. The relationship might be intense, brief, catalytic, and then complete. Not every synchronistic encounter is meant to become a sustained partnership. Some people are threshold guardians, appearing at transitions to help you cross from one stage of life to another. Once the threshold is crossed, their role is complete. Trying to force such a relationship into conventional structures of forever creates suffering. The synchronicity was in the encounter and what it initiated, not necessarily in the duration. Jung worked extensively with the I Ching, the ancient Chinese oracle, precisely because it operated on synchronistic principles. When you consult the I Ching, you're not getting information about the future through clairvoyance. You're creating a moment where the unconscious can speak through the random fall of coins or yarrow stalks. The meaning isn't in the coins, it's in the psychological state of the questioner meeting the archetypal wisdom of the text at that particular moment. Similarly, when someone enters your life through synchronistic arrangement, the meaning isn't entirely in them as a person. It's in the intersection of their psychological reality and yours at this particular moment in both your developmental arcs. The fifth sign is what Jung called the activation of the anima or animus. For those new to Jungian concepts, the anima is the unconscious feminine aspect in a man's psyche, and the animus is the unconscious masculine aspect in a woman's psyche. These aren't gender stereotypes. They're psychological functions related to how we relate to the unconscious, how we experience soul, how we connect with what's other to ego consciousness. When your anima or animus is activated, suddenly the outer world feels ensouled. You see significance in details you'd normally overlook. You feel more alive, more creative, more connected to mythological dimensions of existence. A person who constellates your anima or animus carries a kind of magical quality. They seem to embody beauty, wisdom, adventure, or depth beyond what any ordinary human could actually contain. This is projection, yes, but it's purposeful projection. The psyche projects these inner figures onto outer people so that you'll pay attention, so that you'll be drawn into relationship with these unconscious contents. Over time, if the work is done consciously, you withdraw the projection and integrate those qualities. But the initial fascination, that sense of having met someone who is somehow more than human, that's often a sign that your anima or animus has found a hook in external reality. Here's what this looks like practically. You meet someone, and suddenly you're writing poetry when you haven't written creatively in years. You're thinking about life's big questions again. You're remembering dreams. You're feeling things with an intensity you'd forgotten was possible. This isn't happening because they're special, though they may be wonderful. It's happening because they've activated an archetypal layer of your psyche that had been dormant. The universe, yourself, brings such people into your life when it's time for that layer to come online, when your ego is strong enough to handle the inflation and subsequent deflation that anima or animus activation inevitably brings. Jung was careful to warn about the dangers here. Anima and animus fascination can lead to possession, to losing yourself in the beloved, to making terrible life decisions because you're operating from an archetypal rather than human level.
The person becomes a god or goddess in your perception, and you sacrifice everything, including reality testing, at that altar.
The sign that the universe wants you with someone isn't just intensity. It's intensity combined with increasing consciousness. If the relationship makes you more aware, more individuated, more capable of holding paradox and ambiguity, that's synchronistic. If it makes you more unconscious, more merged, more lost in fantasy, that's possession. The sixth sign is the quality of timing that can only be called kairos rather than chronos. The Greeks had two words for time. Chronos is clock time, sequential and measurable. Kairos is right time, the opportune moment. Time is fullness rather than sequence. Synchronistic encounters always have a kairos quality. It's not just that you meet someone, it's that you meet them at the exact psychological moment when you're capable of receiving what the encounter offers. A year earlier, you wouldn't have noticed them. A year later, the connection might feel irrelevant. But now, in this particular configuration of your becoming, they appear with precise timing. Jung observed this repeatedly in his clinical work. A patient would be stuck for months, going in circles around the same complex. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, someone would enter their life who personified the very quality or wound they'd been circling. And in relating to this person and working through the projections and complications this relationship stirred up, the patient would finally move through the stuck place. The universe hadn't mechanically sent the person, but the readiness of the patient's psyche and the availability of the other person synchronized in ways that created developmental opportunity. This is why trying to force relationship with someone before the kairos moment, or trying to sustain it after the kairos moment has passed, creates such suffering. We want chronos relationships, reliable and permanent. But sometimes the psyche needs kairos encounters, perfectly timed and complete when they're complete. Wisdom lies in distinguishing between the two, in honoring the gift of the kairos connection without trying to force it into chronos structures it was never meant to inhabit. Let me share something Jung wrote toward the end of his life. In his late reflections on synchronicity and alchemy, he noted that the greatest synchronicities often occurred at moments of profound transformation, when an old self was dying and a new self struggling to be born. In those liminal spaces, the boundaries between inner and outer become permeable. What's gestating in the unconscious begins to take form in external life. People, events, symbols appear that seem to know what you're going through, that seem to offer exactly what you need, even though rationally there's no way they could know your internal process. This is the genius of the psyche operating as a unified field rather than a divided one. When someone enters your life during such a threshold period, pay attention. Their arrival is likely not random. You're in a state of openness, of psychological readiness, that creates possibility for synchronistic encounter. This doesn't mean you should marry everyone who appears during a transformational period. It means you should be curious about what they're mirroring, what they're activating, what question their presence is posing to your evolving sense of self. The seventh sign is what Jung called the conjunctio, the sacred marriage, showing up in both your dream life and your waking interactions. The conjunctio isn't literal marriage. It's the union of opposites within the psyche, the integration of conscious and unconscious, masculine and feminine, spirit and matter, into a new wholeness. When a relationship has synchronistic significance, your dreams will often feature wedding imagery, union symbols, images of two becoming one. And in waking life, you'll notice that being with this person helps you access parts of yourself that were previously split off or inaccessible. This is different from codependence, where you need the other person to feel whole. In true conjunctio, the other person's presence catalyzes your own internal integration. You become more yourself, not less. You access your own masculine or feminine qualities more fully, not by imitating them, but by encountering them in embodied form and then recognizing them within. The relationship functions as an alchemical vessel, a contained space where transformation happens through the friction and harmony of two distinct psychological systems encountering each other deeply. Jung would ask, what is trying to be born through this relationship? What new configuration of self is this connection making possible? These are better questions than, is this person my soulmate? Or, will this Now, a word of caution, because this territory is prone to inflation and misunderstanding. Not every strong attraction is synchronistic. Not every intense connection is universe ordained. The ego is brilliant at manufacturing spiritual significance for its desires. You want someone, so you convince yourself the universe wants you to have them. You experience limerence, that cocktail of obsessive attraction and anxious attachment